Welcome to the latest First Voice Monthly Roundup podcast, brought to you by First Voice magazine, the official flagship magazine of the Federation of Small Businesses, and the go-to podcast for news, tips, and important information for small businesses and the self-employed. This episode is our February Small Business Roundup, in which we'll take a look back at some of the important issues you need to be aware of from the past few weeks, and a quick look at anything important on the radar in the coming weeks. To help me do that, I'm pleased to say I'm joined by FSB's Matt Dickinson, who will help us unravel the important current issues facing you and your small business. Matt, good to have you here.
Hi, John. Yeah, good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No, you're welcome. Obviously, the small business space is moving fast, and there have been a few big developments in the past month or so. So let's get straight into those. One of the things that's really grown in importance throughout the pandemic has been keeping an eye on business confidence. And I believe FSB has just released the latest results of the FSB Small Business Index. What were the key findings of that, Matt, and what's the mood among businesses?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed picture, if I'm honest, John. So, I mean, on the kind of downsides, confidence as a whole amongst small businesses in the UK has hit a one-year low. It's back into negative territory. And actually what we saw throughout the course of last year was a general ebbing away of confidence. I think we all felt a few false dawns where the pandemic was concerned, kind of moments where we thought things were finally looking a lot better and the virus was on the retreat. And then a few moments where we had unexpected introduction of restrictions when we weren't necessarily anticipating them. So steady fall in confidence over last year, 1 year low towards Christmas when we had another disrupted festive trading season and the news that the government is planning this very damaging national insurance contributions increase for both employers, employees and sole traders. So as a whole, confidence down. Big issues that came out, late payments, increasingly an issue over the pandemic. I mean, it's long been a campaigning priority for us, trying to get our members' invoices paid on time. We have a really awful endemic late payment, poor payment culture right across the UK that destroys a lot of businesses in the end because corporates just won't pay on time. That's worsened over lockdown. So we now have we estimate 400,000 businesses that are being threatened by that one issue alone. So about 1 in 10 of our members saying that it's grown as an issue and is now threatening the viability of their business. Elsewhere, exporters still struggling with more and more admin requirements being laid at their door, costs in the round going up, inputs, utilities, inflationary pressure really making it difficult for businesses, and access to finance really dropping off. I mean, we had the very important and successful emergency loan schemes over lockdowns. Those have now come to an end and we're seeing record lows among our members in terms of applications and approvals, which is a real concern because the emergency loans can't be seen as done. You know, we have new businesses starting in this country every single day. They need finance to grow, invest, expand. So that's a concerning one. On the flip side, on the more positive side, we do now have more than half of our members saying they're planning to expand over the coming years. They have that intention to grow their business, and that's recovered really to a pre-pandemic level. It's very, very similar level, just over half that we saw in the same period in 2019. Before trading restrictions had come in. And on the hiring side, which I think we're going to get onto, on the hiring side, we've got about 1 in 5 of the members saying they're planning to increase headcounts. So appetite for hiring, appetite for growth. We now just need the government to deliver us some more pro-small business policies and think again about this national insurance element.
Yes, a number of those issues related to COVID, as you would expect. You touched on the issue of hiring there. Another big topic we've been hearing a lot about in recent months is that of staff shortages and firms having problems recruiting. What's the picture there for small businesses at the moment?
Well, in terms of what we found from the small business index that we just published, we've got about a third of the membership saying that skills shortages are a significant barrier to their growth ambitions, which is very high. It hit an all-time high over the autumn, and remains a really pressing issue. But I mean, it's important to stress that that's not way off the level that we saw pre-pandemic. This is a really long-standing issue, skills shortages within the UK. So, I mean, in terms of the picture in the round, we have more than 1 million vacancies out there currently, and about half of them are in health and social care, retail and activities linked to retail, and the accommodation and food, what the government calls the accommodation and food sector. So leisure, hospitality, businesses. So, I mean, in terms of what's driving this trend, over the pandemic, a lot of people reassessing their situation, moving industries, starting up their own businesses, becoming self-employed. There's been quite a lot of movement within the labour market, which has left shortages in those, particularly in those areas I mentioned. Younger people perhaps more reluctant to join the workforce because there are fewer opportunities, so they're staying in education. Older workers thinking more about retirement and maybe retiring early or doing less work than they had perhaps planned because the pandemic had an impact in their industry. Elsewhere, since we left the European Union, the best estimates put the drop in the EU workforce here. They put the drop at about 200,000 people that are no longer in the workforce that were there before in terms of providing skills from across the EU. And we now have a new immigration system, which, I mean, it's always been challenging for smaller businesses to recruit beyond the EU historically in terms of the points-based element. It's expensive. It's administratively quite challenging if you're a smaller business rather than a big one. And with this new system where that's applying across the piece, that challenge is much more present if you're looking to recruit from overseas. So, I mean, in terms of what can be done, I mean, the government this week has announced that it's trying to do more to mobilize people who are engaged with their job centre, so encouraging them to look beyond the sectors that they're currently interested in to maybe branch out more and try something new. There's also been some quite successful targeted interventions that we've called for, particularly in social care. There's now a health and social care visa that's been expanded quite significantly, which is really more of a fast track for care homes who are really struggling to recruit the right people from the domestic market. They have more of a fast track now through that new immigration system to bring people on who are from overseas. Similarly, and that's something we called for. We've been calling for a while now, and that's now been delivered. Similarly, I think we all heard a lot, particularly run up into Christmas, about shortages of heavy goods vehicle drivers. Again, we had some engagement with the government, and they've launched a package which has really kind of honed in on fast tracking training to be an HGV driver, testing capacity to get those qualifications through, and we've seen this also in teaching, but a similar initiative within HGV, the HGV industry, where the government has been encouraging those who already have qualifications, who have retired or moved to other sectors, to maybe reconsider coming back into the HGV industry. But I think there's a much bigger, because as I say, this is a long-standing issue. There's a much bigger question about how do we secure more of a talent pipeline, and how do we get vocational education and skills qualifications on a par with academics. It's not something we're particularly good at in this country. And also on the policy side, so take apprenticeships. There's always been challenges about making them appeal perhaps to young people who are set on going to university. But the government also introduced an apprenticeship levy system where big businesses have to kind of pay into a big pool, which is then supposedly shared right across employers, which enables them to take on apprentices. It hasn't been very successful. So to put it into context, before that levy system was launched, we had about 1 million starts a year in terms of apprenticeships, and that's now more like 700,000. So it's dropped by about a third. So we're speaking to government. We'd like to see that system reformed. How do we get that money out to those businesses who can really create opportunities? We now have T-levels in the UK launched, up and running, which are a new vocational alternative to in the higher education space for those that are at GCSE level. So we're hoping that that will help, and it's important that within that there's a more practical element, and we're keen for that practical element to involve small businesses. So that's an ongoing conversation. But I think there's also a question about perception. You know, how do we remove some of the biases within what you do at a higher education level? So, you know, if you're a young person, you go to work in a bar, you know, that can, straight from school, you know, that can be a path into something much greater. You know, you start managing people within that context. Ultimately, you start managing the whole bar. And then with time, you're learning the ropes to the point where you can launch your own outfit. You become a small business owner, hopefully become a member of ours, and we equip you with what you need to go on and you know, fulfill your full potential in that industry. So a lot of challenges there, kind of past and present. And as I say, we're working across the piece to see how we can improve the situation.
Yeah, it's a really complex area. Thanks for picking it apart for us, Matt. January marked the 1 year anniversary of the Good Business Charter, which you know, was launched to help small firms stand out from the crowd a bit and lead the way on issues from sort of ethical employment practices and prompt payments, which you mentioned continue to be a problem across the small business sector. 1 year on, how's that going? How have sign-ups been?
Yeah, it's been good. So yeah, I mean, the Good Business Charter was originally launched by Julian Richer of Richer Sounds. He built up that home entertainment chain, turned it into an employee ownership trust, and has always been a real advocate for sustainable and ethical business. So yeah, originally launched as more of a big business initiative. We worked with the Good Business Charter to bring about a version that our members could be a part of. And yeah, after year one, GBC, they had about 100 or so signatories. Since we partnered with Good Business Charter, we're now closing in on about 1,000. So really, really massive growth. And if you're a member of ours, you can be a part of that for free if you apply before the end of March. So do look out for that. If you search Good Business Charter, you'll find it. And there are kind of 10 components that you have to sign up to. And then you get that stamp to say you're part of the charter, which is brilliant because it's not only the right thing to do, but it's great for business as well, because as we all know, people buy from people, and we all want to buy from businesses that are doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you mentioned that's a partnership, and it was launched through Richard Sounds, or the founder of Richard Sounds. How important are those partnerships? How are they helping FSB sort of widen the offering for small businesses? Are they integral to the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're really fundamental to what we do, both on the member support side and on the advocacy and campaigning side. I mean, on the support side, we have partnerships on the legal front in terms of the legal helpline that we offer, particularly, which is open to members all day, every day, if they need to phone up and they need support with anything in that area. On the late payment side, we have a partnership where we can help get your invoices paid more quickly. On the access to finance side, we have a few different partnerships where we can help you with banking as well as accessing credit and different types of finance. So yeah, a lot on the direct member support side. And then on the advocacy side, it's absolutely integral. You know, in the past, we've worked with the likes of the charity Mind around the wellbeing space and supporting members and their staff with improving mental well-being in the workplace, which is another one that stands out. The Consumer Group, we have a long-running campaign with them around financial inclusion and particularly around access to cash. As our bank branches and ATMs are closing, that causes real challenges for town centres. So we're working very closely with them and recently launched a cash pledge with them, which I'd encourage anyone who thinks it's of interest to have a look at, where you can kind of commit to making sure your customers can use cash if that's their preferred payment method. So yeah, it's integral, and the Good Business Charter, is just a fantastic one. It's grown so quickly, and all of the members I've spoken to about it have got a lot out of it, as I say, both in terms of improving their well-being at work and improving their appeal to customers as well.
Terrific. Matt, that's a really good sort of unpicking of the big issues that we've seen over the last few weeks. But just looking forward slightly, are there any big issues that small businesses need to be particularly aware of or on the lookout for in the coming weeks?
Yeah, I mean, so in England, we now have restrictions pretty much eased entirely. So it's really all hands to the pump to kind of really try and get our economic recovery firing on all cylinders after what was another really frustrating festive period. And it's, on all of us to get out there and support our small businesses as much as we can over what is generally a bit of a slower period for those on high streets particularly. On the political side, the Chancellor has now said there'll be a spring statement on the 23rd of March. So we'll be working hard in the Westminster office to try and influence that and try and get some positives out of that. Because as things stand, we've got this kind of flashpoint moment in April where some of the business support linked to the pandemic, particularly around business rates and the discount for high street operators there, is coming to an end. The discounted rate of VAT for leisure and hospitality is ending at that same point. And it's also the same moment when the national living wage will be going up. Business rates, bills, fresh bills will be landing. And as I mentioned at the outset, and I think you discussed it on the pod last time, this really regressive and damaging national insurance increase that's planned that will hurt lower earners and small businesses the most. So we'll keep pushing and we'll keep campaigning, doing what we can. And I mean, if you're struggling at this point, as I say, after a really challenging winter, then definitely, speak to us, speak to your local authority as well, your bank, your landlord. There might be some more support out there than you perhaps thought.
Yeah, it's a really good message and a good one for us to end on. Matt, thanks so much for taking us through the key small business announcements from the past month as part of our monthly Small Business Roundup podcast series. That was really helpful. Thank you also to our audience for listening. While I have your attention, I'd just like to remind you that you can subscribe to the First Voice podcast to receive regular updates and guidance on the big issues affecting small businesses. And do please also remember that you can find a whole host of additional webinars, podcasts, and other content on the First Voice website at firstvoice.fsb.org.uk. Many thanks for listening.